your testimony that those allegations are categorically false?
Unequivocally, categorically false.
So there have been no occasions during your tenure when FBI personnel...
There are some hearings in Washington. Everyone knows what will happen. Questions are asked, answers are given. Both sides try to look good for the cameras, and everyone leaves the room. But on Tuesday, May 12, 2026, the scene in the Senate Appropriations subcommittee was nothing like any of that. When FBI Director Kash Patel sat down for the annual budget hearing, he had adopted the cool, aggressive, assertive stance he had maintained for years. But when Senator Chris Van Hollen began his opening statement, the atmosphere in the room suddenly changed. Van Hollen had brought to the floor the allegations made by the Atlantic magazine. The allegations that Patel consumed excessive alcohol during working hours, became unable to work due to being drunk and dazed, and that his staff had to break down his door. And Van Hollen did not stop at just asking these allegations. He cornered Patel as a sworn FBI director, in a place where lying can mean up to 5 years in prison. Setting the scene, the Atlantic's bombshell. Everything exploded in mid-April 2026. The Atlantic announced with a report compiled from multiple sources that a serious alarm bell had rung within the FBI's internal world. According to the report, Patel's excessive alcohol consumption had become a source of concern within the government. The Atlantic's report stated that the FBI director's alcohol consumption was causing concern throughout the government. In response to this news, Patel filed a defamation lawsuit against the magazine, demanding $50 million in damages. Patel's move is meaningful because filing a defamation suit is saying, "This is a lie." And the critical point was this: the moment you say, "This is a lie," you are forced to repeat the same statement under oath in front of Congress. That was exactly the pressure Chris Van Hollen was applying. Van Hollen's opener: the knife behind the courtesy. Every effective interrogation is a process of setting a trap. The most dangerous traps, however, begin with the most polite questions. Van Hollen hit directly in his opening remarks. The allegations that you were so drunk and out of control that your staff had to forcibly enter your home are extremely serious. If true, it means you grossly neglected your duties, he said. Read this sentence carefully. Van Hollen did not say, "You are drunk." He said, "if true." That distinction is legally significant because Van Hollen was cornering Patel here. He would either deny the allegations and risk lying under oath, or he would concede and might have to resign. Van Hollen explained this after the hearing. "I told him clearly today, as long as this does not affect his ability to protect the American people, his private life is none of my business," he said. Strong framing. Van Hollen linked the issue to a public safety concern, not a personal moral judgment. The issue of whether the FBI director is doing his job. And within this framework, each of Patel's denials was turning into a deeper trap. Patel's outburst: defense or attack? The reactions of people who are cornered generally fall into one of two categories. They either submit quietly or go on the offensive. Patel chose the second. But this choice, far from saving him, made his situation even worse. Patel launched an attack on Van Hollen, shouting, "You are the only one in this room who drinks on the taxpayer's dime during the day. You're the only one rolling margaritas with a convicted gang member and rapist in El Salvador. You're the only one rolling margaritas with a gang member and a rapist in El Salvador." Think about this move. The FBI director, in a congressional hearing under oath, accuses a senator of drinking alcohol instead of answering budget questions. So what is the basis for this accusation? The incident Patel referred to was Van Hollen's visit to El Salvador. During this visit, he met with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an immigrant who was deported to El Salvador despite a court ruling. During the meeting, Salvadoran officials placed margarita-like drinks on the table. El Salvador President Bukele shared photos, claiming that Van Hollen and Garcia were sipping margaritas. However, Van Hollen stated that he never touched those drinks. Patel also posted on social media a $7,128 expense at the lobby bar in Washington from Van Hollen's campaign finance reports. But the bill was in the general hospitality category, which could include food. Van Hollen's team said it was a campaign fund expenditure for a post-election holiday reception for more than 50 staffers. So Patel's evidence was two things: a drink that the other side said was untouched, and a suspicious drink that the Salvadoran government put on stage, and a general catering bill that included the cost of food. Perjury trap. Do you know it's a crime to lie to Congress? The most shocking moment of the trial was when Van Hollen cornered everything with a single question. Van Hollen directly asked Patel, "Do you know that lying to Congress is a crime?" Patel's answer, "I'm not lying to Congress." Patel's response, "I'm not lying to Congress." With this statement, Patel completely denied the Atlantic's claims under oath. This is a legally extremely significant moment, because now there are two possibilities. Either Patel is telling the truth and the Atlantic sources are completely wrong, or Patel gave a statement that could face perjury in federal court. To understand the magnitude of this risk, it is enough to know this. If it is proven that Patel lied to Congress, he could face up to 5 years in prison, heavy fines, and removal from office. It could also jeopardize any security-related or law enforcement position in the long term. Van Hollen's asking this question was not an ordinary political move. This was about locking Patel into his own narrative. You deny it? Fine. Then your denial has been recorded. Now, any new evidence that may emerge in the coming days will be compared with this denial under oath. Van Hollen's main move, the alcohol test challenge. The most unexpected turn of the trial was when Van Hollen not only substantiated the claims, but also challenged Patel to a concrete test. Van Hollen suggested using the AUDIT, or Alcohol Use Disorders Identification Test. Patel, in return, accepted on the condition that Van Hollen undergo the same test. This moment elevated the session beyond a mere political squabble, because Patel seemed to accept moving his denial from just a verbal defense to a measurable and verifiable ground. The next day, Chris Van Hollen shared his own test results on the X platform, saying, "He told me yesterday that he would get tested too. Here are my results. Considering all the things he said yesterday, I guess the numbers can be played with. Now let's see yours, Director Patel," he said. This move once again showcased Van Hollen's strategic prowess. By accepting the test, he proved his transparency. He forced Patel to share the results, and by creating an expectation, he pushed the ball into Patel's court. Out of control. Van Hollen's post-trial assessment. In an interview with a news channel after the trial, Van Hollen evaluated Patel as follows. "This guy, who should be running the FBI, has completely lost control here. MS now." This assessment is more than just a political criticism. The FBI director's aggressive, disorganized, and angry demeanor during the congressional hearing directly contradicts the image of a calm, reliable leader. Moreover, all these scenes were recorded. Van Hollen added, "I believe Patel is not being honest. This raises questions about all of his conduct. This situation makes him question all his actions. This calls into question all of his conduct," he said, and the scope of the hearing suddenly widened. Chris Van Hollen was now launching a broader credibility inquiry that would scrutinize not just the alcohol allegations, but every decision Patel made and every statement he gave as FBI director. If he was lying under oath before Congress, what else was he lying about? Italy trip, unaccounted expenses. The only topic that came up during the trial was not the alcohol allegations. Patel's trip to Italy was also questioned. Patel stated that he was in Italy to ensure Olympic security and coordinate the extradition of a senior Chinese cybercriminal. He emphasized that the trip was planned in advance, and an FBI spokesperson confirmed this.
But critics highlighted a detail about the conclusion of this journey. Patel had attended the locker room celebrations immediately after the U.S. hockey team won the Olympic gold medal. As an official FBI director outside the scope of official duties in a rather extravagant celebration, this detail may seem insignificant on its own, but when combined with the alcohol allegations and the accountability issue, it creates a pattern. When, where, and how does the FBI director step outside the boundaries required by the job? Patel's real problem, not denial, inconsistency. The most important lesson from this trial is that Patel's denials are not about content, but about form. Patel denied the allegations. He did it under oath. In return, he accused Van Hollen of drinking. The evidence he presented was either unverified or taken out of context. The fact that an FBI director under oath described a senator as someone who rolls margaritas with gang members without providing evidence is an extremely serious issue from an institutional perspective. Because the duty of the FBI director is to support allegations with concrete evidence, not assumptions. This is one of the fundamental working principles of the institution, and unfounded accusations actually fall under the behaviors that the FBI itself investigates. In CNN's analysis, this point was particularly emphasized. Patel was not an ordinary bureaucrat or politician. He was the head of the FBI and was testifying under oath to Congress. Therefore, the weight of the inconsistencies that emerged was naturally seen as much more serious. Conclusion: every word spoken under oath is recorded. This hearing was not about the veracity of a single allegation. The main debate was whether the head of America's most powerful domestic intelligence agency could testify openly, consistently, and accountably before Congress. The pressure Chris Van Hollen applied was precisely aimed at testing this, and Patel's response, launching a counterattack instead of answering directly, diverting the agenda instead of clarifying questions, and resorting to tactical maneuvers instead of transparency, appeared to many observers as a defensive reflex and panic rather than accountability. If new evidence emerges in the coming days and it is determined that Patel lied to Congress, he could face severe legal consequences, including up to 5 years in prison. Now the ball is in Patel's court. Will he share the results of the alcohol test? Will sources come forward with new information? Will the investigation deepen? We will follow all of this from here. If you don't want to miss these analyses, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next video.